and it's also very important for the bank. Survey interest in a Thai community bank and determine what services are desired. To determine the feasibility of a Thai community bank, and if so, what kind of models, what way the bank should be made, and suggest a model for implementation and discuss the next steps for the project's development. And that's all related to the bank. Okay, banking. Banking is good to know because it tells you a little about how the U.S. economy is doing. The U.S. economy is certainly getting better, so sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but it's been getting better for a good period of time. U.S. banks have continued to recover. Banks tend to recover first because of what they sell is money. So if the money moves, the banks tend to do better. Industry profitability has improved significantly, and the percentage of unprofitable banks in the U.S. has fallen to the lowest level in 5 years. So you can see, or barely see, that these charts are basically telling you is that how the banks have made money, that they've made a lot of money, becoming more profitable. Just last week, they were also talking about the banks with regards to real estate and mortgages, that they're at 21% lower than they were the year before about people having problems paying their mortgages. That was very good news for the banks and certainly good news for the economy. In the state of California, bringing it from national to just the state, the banks are becoming far more profitable, and the ones that are not profitable continue to drop very rapidly. California banks experienced the best quarterly earnings in 6 years, bolstered by improved asset quality and, again, loan sales. So, I mean, the things that the banks are doing, giving loans out, they're better, more people are getting them, and more people are paying them on time. Like the national trend, California banks reported increases in net interest income, and that's very important, and non-interest income, and reduced loan loss. So basically means they're making money from their loans, they're making money from charging you for sending wires to Thailand, and they're making money from their own investments. Increased earnings and increased asset quality has led to the highest increases in return on assets and return on equity in over 3 years. Those are important from a financial perspective. ROA and ROE are equations in finance that are very important to us. It tells us how solvent, how the banks are doing. Those are equations and ratios that tell them how they make money. We're almost done with the boring things. Thai ethnic banking niche. The ethnic banking refers to a financial institution that primarily provides financial services to one particular ethnic group. The most successful examples were found in the Korean and Chinese banking community. The first Chinese bank that did it is actually still around. They're doing quite well. These banks have escalated to the top 5 in banking asset size in the Los Angeles area. These banks, the Korean and Chinese, both the Asian and the non-Asian banks, are not necessarily banks from their countries. These are locally generated banks. BBCN and Hanmi Bank in the Korean community. Those banks were built here. They're not necessarily Korean banks that came to establish themselves in Los Angeles. They're community banks. They're banks that were started by people in the community to address specific needs in the community. And those were the banks that have grown. We'll see in a little while the size of these banks. But BBC and Hanmi in particular are in the top 5 banks in the entire state. These banks have flourished by servicing the local community with tailored services and capital. These communities have also flourished by the infusion of working capital and loans. So in order to grow a business, you have to have, let's say, more money than you can possibly make when you're small. In order to make a second restaurant or open a second business, you need extra money, more than you're just making to survive. The question of whether this model will work with the Thai community begins by a closer look at the population. You have to have a core number of people generating a core amount of money to make a bank work. So we looked at immigration to start. One of the things we had to find out, our first objective was how many Thai are in the community. The Thai community was measured against the Korean and the Chinese populations, as those communities have Legal U.S. residents, the Thai U.S. residents are growing 2.5 times faster than the second fastest Asian segment, totaling 9,962 Thai U.S. residents in 2011, which was the last complete year for information. It may not sound like a lot, but it actually is. Those are people who receive residency. And then the amount of U.S. citizens, Thai U.S. citizens that are of Thai descent increased 32% over the past decade to 5,300 Thai in 2011, while Korean and Chinese populations experienced decreases in stagnation. But what it's telling us is that most of the Koreans and the Chinese that were going to immigrate to the United States, many of them have already done so. There's still people coming, but not as much. Big waves of immigration for those communities happened. The Koreans were actually, their immigration grew into 3 waves. Most of them came through Hawaii. And the Thai population increase, and a lot of it is from domestic, but a lot of it is still from people immigrating from Thailand to Los Angeles, mostly Los Angeles. And the non-immigrant admission is very high. Thai population amount of growth of 20% to 95,000 Thai in 2011. And again, the Korean and Chinese populations have doubled. But those people aren't staying. So what we're seeing is that the Koreans and the Chinese are coming here mainly for school. The amount of Koreans and Chinese coming into the U.S. school system is tremendous. It's quite large. More importantly, the Thai population still ranks as the fastest growing in permanent residents and naturalized citizens. U.S. immigration patterns demonstrate that the Thai population is more likely to stay in the U.S. with a permanent legal status rather than under a temporary visa, like the Korean and Chinese immigrants. So even though many of the Thai, like a lot of immigrants, when they come, they think they're going back, many of them actually stay, more than maybe they even think. So that's important for us to know, that the immigration population is coming and staying. That makes these things more important for a bank. Population with 27% growth, the Thai population is the fastest growing Asian subset, totaling 30,000 in 2010. The median age has increased from 35 to 37, demonstrating the increased amount of older Thai generations in Los Angeles. While being the fastest growing, the Thai population has also recorded the fastest growth in foreign entry. Again, so that means there's a lot of Thai still coming from Thailand. And the Thais have the highest percentage of native-born U.S. citizens at 33.1%. That basically means 1 out of every 3 Thai couples who come to Los Angeles or the United States stay and have families here. The Thai population is choosing the U.S. as a suitable place to raise their children. Many times the normal rates are usually around 15%, 10 to 15%. This is double. It's very high. And obviously, as everyone here knows, it's a very close community. More than 80% of the Thai population over 5 years old speak Thai. Almost none of the Pata, like myself, speak Thai, but there's certainly more and more. Those that actually marry into a Thai family tend to speak Thai within 2 years. The Thai population is well educated, 11% have professional degrees, doctors, lawyers, and 33% hold bachelor's degrees. Thais have the highest percentage of labor force participation, basically 2 out of 3, a low unemployment rate of 6%, and that again is about 6 months old, that number. National employment is right now around 7.5. The Thai community is rapidly increasing in income. The mean household earnings per capita has increased by nearly 40% to reach $75,000 and $25,500 for per capita income, means per person. Per person. So what does this mean? It means when compared to the larger Asian communities, the Thai population is growing and is outperforming in multiple categories. Certainly still smaller. Koreans are around 650,000. Koreans in the Los Angeles area, and the Chinese are well over 1 million. But Thai are growing faster percentage-wise. they've calculated only 73% participation rate for the state. That would mean that the estimated total is no less than 42,000 tied in Los Angeles. Then we would take on the number of people that probably don't participate, and we added a calculation for that. We believe, though some estimate the number is as high as 100,000, we think there's actually around 60,000 tied in the Los Angeles area. This is just the Los Angeles area, not all of Southern California. With excelling educational attainment income, combined with lower proficiency speaking English, the community is clearly financially underserviced. All right, now trying to figure out the economic information about the Thai community. Over 75% of the Thai businesses surveyed are in the restaurant market segment. Health services, which includes massage parlors, represents around 13%, while the remaining 12% is split between 6 smaller market segments: import and export and other things. Most of the businesses cater to non-Thai clients, while the highest concentrations of Thai clients are found in businesses here within Thai specialized services, such as Thai real estate, auto repair centers, and retail stores. Majority of businesses are over 5 years old and maintain the same ownership. If they're going to sell, they typically sell somewhere around 7 to 8 years. It's usually sell to other Thai. Many of the older businesses primarily cater to the immigrant Thai population, signifying the long-term commitment to the Thai customer. Most of the 3 out of every 4 Thai businesses in the community generate over $250,000 in annual sales. Nearly 20%, 1 out of 5 people who responded reported over $1 million in annual sales. And many of this we also calculated ourselves. Because, of course, everyone tells you how much they are making. All businesses surveyed presented positive earnings, with 64%, almost 2 out of 3, making up to $100,000 in annual earnings. That's after tax. That's how much they've made. Majority of businesses are over 5 years old, have positive earnings year over year. This demonstrates that the Thai community is economically vibrant and experiences entrepreneurial success. One of the reasons why the Thai community isn't very centralized is because so many of the Thai are very entrepreneurial, and they'll go to many parts all around Southern California, and they open up their own businesses versus just taking a job somewhere else. So they may not seem as big because they're not all together. There are a lot of Thai. The Thai economic profile. In 2011, the U.S. Department of Commerce valued the U.S.-Thai trade at $35.8 billion. 2011's totals represent the largest volume of both imports and exports within the last 5 years. Thailand is the 5th largest trading partner with the city of Los Angeles, totaling imports and exports at $11.3 billion in 2010, and those figures represented almost a 20% increase. These trade totals are projected to grow year over year through 2016. And certainly, trade agreements and things help those things grow. Based on the Thai economic survey information, the business's samples revenues of $49.3 million represented 15% of the Thai business population. So from this, we estimate that the Thai business population in the local area is valued to be approximately $330 million. That's almost a third of $1 billion. Valuing business profit at 20% of annual sales, total profit is valued at $65.9 million. And the personal income? Personal income is calculated by multiplying the amended Thai population total of 42,000 that we knew was there, with a per capita income of 25.5, and on a personal savings rate, the Thai personal savings is estimated at $85 million, at an 8% saving rate of personal income. more services, and they generate the money to pay for those services. To try and find out economic impact, how much impact does the Thai community have in California and Southern California? Based on the recirculation of money through everyday transactions, we follow paid expenses through 3 cycles of economic redistribution. From this, we calculate that the Thai businesses and personal income initial revenue totaled $1.39 billion. 3 cycles of redistribution, $3 billion. What that means is redistribution is you make the money from your business, that's 1. You have to pay your staff, that would be 2. Your staff pays for other things, that would be 3. All those things have impact. That's money going in and out of the community, going in and out for services. So that's money that's moving. That's how you calculate economic impact. Not just how much goes into your pocket, but what's utilized with the money as you go in. A bank would utilize that information because they may use all that money each time. A high level of demand exists for a Thai community bank. 79% of the population had moderate to high interest for a Thai bank. The Thai population is a highly banked population that use only basic financial services. So most of the people that we spoke with and the businesses we looked at utilized the bank in some way. Maybe not to its fullest, but they did have banking accounts. Many of them had merchant accounts to take credit cards. Highest demand of service is international services and Thai-speaking banking officers. Followed by better access to capital through wire transfers, loans, credit, and merchant services. As fees and regulations increase from the larger banks, and those are the 4 big banks, Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, the big 3. Smaller banks with specialized services will absorb these new accounts. Due to the high response rate to desired banking service, we believe the Thai community is still in search for the correct financial institution. Let's start talking about what the ethnic banks would be, or what they are. An ethnic bank refers to a financial institution that primarily provides financial services to a particular ethnic group. This has normally been done by a foreign national bank. The community bank specializes in relationship lending and is characterized by local ownership, local control, and local decision-making catering to the surrounding demographics. Where our commercial bank is focused on the general business market, by combining the 2 pieces of the community bank and the commercial bank, the Thai community bank is most suitable since it is very well positioned to use detailed knowledge of the needs and lifestyles of its Thai clients in relation to the local business environment. In doing so, it creates specialized services and programs to maintain long-term community relationships. Some of the services, the financial need of the Thai community are primarily standard banking services. While the top demanded services, international, Thai staff and language, and access to affordable bank loans are standard, a union of all 3 does not exist currently in the community. This does not come as a surprise as large banks are unable or unwilling to modify established risk models factoring in long-term community-specific risk. Very few of the banks have been looking at the Thai communities for their needs, with the exception of really Union Bank. Union Bank does realize there's a lot of potential deposits, but I think they're just looking to open a branch in the community. Community Bank will fulfill this demand by providing specialized services that are currently demanded by and not yet provided by the Thai community. So they wouldn't just need a branch of a large bank. The idea would be there would be other services that the community would utilize. Special loan packages and other services that other banks simply would not do. Pursuing a unique service strategy with specific focus on the Thai community allows the bank to develop a long-term perspective and relationship with its clients. Community bank can provide syndication of loans. That means they can share the risk with other banks. They can partner with other banks for loans. Trade finance via letters of credit, and business services such as payroll, cash management, and ACH, which is the processing of checks. The use of community banking in the Korean and Chinese were instrumental to the community's growth. Okay. In summary, we believe there is sufficient demand and economic strength to justify the bank, as well as a strong basis to believe that the community would be positively impacted by the bank being put together. So if you're going to put a bank together, what are some of your options? The first thing is you can buy one. Buying one usually is much faster. There is sufficient economic power within the community to support the purchase of a small bank. It wouldn't need to be a very large one. The community, there are many small banks available for purchase at reasonable cost. Acquiring a banking license is faster than by starting the process from scratch, from the beginning. Additionally, once a license is obtained, the bank can move venues, change locations, or add additional branches. From a legal perspective, this is the most practical way to acquire banking licenses by bank acquisition. Applying for licenses with the Federal Reserve, which controls this, does take a long period of time. So the fastest way to build a bank is to buy one. If you're going to start a new bank, that is actually called de novo. That's the term when you start a new bank. It's referred to as a de novo bank. A new bank will take much longer because it takes a long time to be approved. Once it's approved, it requires what's known as a de novo period, where transaction amounts are limited. And actually, for the first year, the bank isn't allowed, during de novo, to loan hardly almost any money at all. It's only allowed to build reserves and deposits. Once it passes the second phase of this de novo period, it can lend to a certain amount, and then it has to pass the third phase of its de novo period to be like every other bank that you know, so have a full set of services. So when you start at the beginning, you start in your own, it can take 3 to 4 years for it to be a fully realized bank. This option contains more steps, time, and cost, a lot more cost. The advantage, of course, when you make something on your own is you get exactly what you want. When you buy something from someone else, it's never exactly what you want. It's close, but you always have to modify it. So you have to make your own changes to it. So when you build something that's your own, of course, you get exactly what you want. It's like buying an old house versus building your own house. Another option is the extension of an existing Thai bank into the commercial banking in Los Angeles. This option will include the involvement of the government and executives from major banks. If this was pursued, it's strongly recommended to closely work with the bank on specific strategies for the U.S. A well-developed model that is different from existing Thai banking service models is believed to do well because of the brand recognition of the Thai banks in the Thai community, as well as existing infrastructure aid in the market. The biggest risk is how the home office will allow the local banks to be managed and operated. The Thai banks are top-down managed, so it depends on the chief executive of the bank as what exactly they would do within the Thai community, not necessarily what the Thai community would need. That's the biggest challenge. Another option, strategic alliance or partnership with an existing Asian bank. Possibly the easiest option would be to collaborate with a large Asian banks like East West, Cathay, or California Bank and Trust, which used to be Sumitomo Bank. Chinese and Korean banks are known to be aggressive and would probably talk because it's money, so they love making more deposits, so they'd be very interested in talking, I'm sure. An effort will be required to express that there is a need within the community, that the branch would need to be focused on the Thai community. here, due to Union Bank showing interest, there seems to be validation that interest in the community exists. Union Bank would have had to done a similar type of report to realize how much money is in the Thai community to acquire its deposits. After looking at all that, what we recommended was establishment of a new local bank by acquisition. Why? Well, there seems to be little interest for the Thai banking community to return to Los Angeles. The large Thai banks that are here are primarily taking care of syndication. They're working with U.S. banks. They're not really interested in opening up a community bank. Other large U.S. and Asian banks are the greatest barriers to the Thai community's growth. They are not focused on developing the Thai community with the necessary levels of services or programs. In other words, a community bank would probably modify its standards to help a small Thai business get along. A standard U.S. bank would use the same criteria. And for a small business, especially those that are cash-based or still very localized, it would be harder. It would be harder for them to get that loan. They'd be less understanding. The formation of a Thai community bank via acquisition is supported by present demand and economy. Things we looked at earlier. As the Thai community continues to develop in sophistication, a small focused bank can do very well by facilitating growth within the community while also growing with the community, which is what community banks are supposed to do. They're supposed to have things that the community needs, offer them loans and packages and services that the community needs. Approvals are based on their knowledge of how the community operates. And those differences are very important for the bank and the community, which is why the Chinese and the Korean community banks were so successful. None of those banks, Senator Cathay, EBCN, Hanmi, are in the billions of dollars. When they started with less than 30 million in market capitalization. Now, almost all of them are between $5 and $15 billion in net earnings. So it's very significant growth. Many times less than 20 years. I mentioned some of the key components in Thai-speaking staff and management. Aggressive and regular field interaction with clients. The Thai community is everywhere, so one central branch isn't going to be enough. They're going to have to go out to the Thai community, just like we did with the survey. And they're going to have to approach members of the Thai business community and sit with them. The bank is going to have to come to the Thai community. There's no question. Because Thai town is very small, but the Thai community is very spread out. So people would require the bank to come to them. Bankers would have to be active in the community by visiting businesses, clients, and various partners, and advise them on how to facilitate growth. And some of these partners are certainly non-Thai. A lot of that Thai trade we saw is not actually being done with Thai. The vast majority of trade between the U.S. and Thailand is non-Thai based. So U.S. companies buying things from Thailand or importing from Thailand, most of that is still not involving any Thai. So there are a lot of people who are non-Thai who would also be interested in specific packages that would help them with doing business between the U.S. and Thailand. So there's a lot of outside money, a lot of outside businesses that aren't Thai that would be very interested in participating in this kind of bank as well. Programs that educate the businesses on the United States business practices, laws, and banking options are also part of community banks. In order to take advantage of things that a bank may offer, there has to be classes to help people show up. So you have to be able to educate the Thai community on how things may be easier for them if they can, to do certain things that maybe no one had ever explained before. And then there's investment education. Since we've learned that most Thai actually do stay within the United States, even though they may have investments also in Thailand, it is very important to prepare them financially for the future. Meaning that if they may have investments in both countries or investments that cross, some of those things can be very complicated. And if there's not a lot of explanation for that, people can lose a lot of money. Active cooperation with Thai trade and commercial partners. Active promotion of the Thai community within the region. This is very important. Preferential rates and modified lending criteria. So that's one of the key components to a community bank. Is that the bank evaluates the businesses differently based on how their knowledge of the community. That's probably one of the most important things. Because banks are primarily lending institutions. It's their number one thing. Strong management with a commitment to community success. This is really important because the person, whoever's going to lead this, if it happens, really has to care. They have to be someone committed to the success of the Thai community. Certainly the community, if this would be something the community invests in, it would be very important for them. And the person who runs that bank, we really need to understand it. So the management needs to be motivated, needs to be trustworthy, and certainly the respect that the community has for them is very, very important. So it's the right person to lead the bank would also be just as important as what the bank does. If it's not the right person, people don't trust them, the bank probably would not succeed. Again, Thai community has reached critical mass. What this means, it has both the amount of people, which is the amount of money, the amount of business, both economically and population, to support a specialized Thai community bank, even at a very small level. When we were reviewing the local Asian American banks, their successes were facilitated when the founding members within the community understood the benefit of a community bank. When Cathay started, they were the first in the Asian community to start. The community was less than 50,000 members at the time. At the time they figured that the estimation in the mid-70s was around 32,000 people. The Thai community already has more than when Cathay started. The way in which they service the community, they customize the products and services, and a strong presence in their community allowed these banks to grow their respective Los Angeles communities. And Cathay in particular was very well known for having, and they still do, a lot of classes and educational pieces where people go to the banks and they have classes put on by the bankers, Small Business Administration, the Department of Labor, all kinds of groups to help members of their community meet these people and understand things that can help their businesses grow. Those things are facilitated by the bank. It's something not Bank of America would normally do. So the viability of the bank seems positive. Doesn't mean it isn't without challenges. There would certainly be challenges. Raising the money for the bank would be a big one. We proposed various models for consideration and recommended one, which is the acquisition, based on our experience and review of the information. The next thing would be to recommend the next step, to develop a comprehensive business plan, as well as search for an investment team and a key manager. Really got to find that person. So I was hoping it would be someone here this afternoon, maybe just volunteer to be that key person. I keep wanting to volunteer to Nora D, but she's actually doing everything. So, and that is all. You made it. Congratulations. Do you have any questions? It's very technical. Sir?
I'm not really a technical in that, but I think like just like know you put here one of the key component. You said that one of the most important thing is the preferential rate. That I could understand. Bank could maybe like charge less percent, less profit. That's not the problem. But the question that I really want to ask is modify rating criteria. Within our community, you also mentioned that most of the business are cash based and then localized. So if we have a community bank, would that be possible for the community bank to modify the rating criteria? From what I your very success.
ครับครับ
But
ก็
the document does not support that. I think that a lot of
เลือกตัวดีกว่า
problem in
ไม่
company.
มองมาทางข่าว
There's a way of solving such problem.
There is, and that's a great point. There are 3 agencies that regulate banking, just at the federal level. And they do give the banks certain criteria, but there is flexibility. Every bank is allowed to set their own lending criteria within reason. But the bank can do its own discretionary lending. In other words, the bank could decide that they liked me and said that it was worth giving me a loan.
Yeah.
They couldn't do it if I had absolutely no ability to pay it back. But as long as they can usually document how they can justify how much that person is making and their ability to pay it back, then normally it's completely acceptable. The key is, of course, that couldn't be maybe 100% of the loans. But they certainly have flexibility. There's certain things that they can do, and there's certain things that the government will require them to do. The biggest thing the government will tell them to do is how much in total that they can lend, based on how much money they have. And what you described is called discretionary lending, and they would give them a percentage of discretionary lending. But if for many of the Thai restaurants that are cash, if they can document, if they can show that money is there, for example, like those cash deposits were going into the bank account, that's called banking history. That's still considered valid. Most of the Thai businesses are cash in Thai town. Outside of Thai town, because most of their clients are non-Thai, most of those have merchant accounts and that document the transactions. So it's more blended between cash and merchant accounts. So I think the answer is that there's no question they could. But you're right, I mean, it is very different.
Right.
That's, I think, one of the reasons why community bank is important, because there are things that are unique within the Thai community because if it's looking to grow. It would need that understanding. It would need someone to understand how the community works.
I met with some Asian banks that they do real estate loan for foreigners. I mean, like some of the banks said, "Oh, okay, we loan you 50%, you put 50% down." Some banks said, "You put 40% down, we lend 60%." But I heard from one of the Asian banks, they said that the federal government come in and say, "You can't do this. It's got to go away." And I mean, like that's one of the things that I would wonder how much flexibility each of the bank have. Even though, like for example, the real estate loan this day, you require someone to put 50% down, you loan only 50%. I mean, like to me, it's just like very, very low risk. But still, the Fed come in and say, "You can't do this."
Those things change all the time, and it's very true. I mean, when it comes to mortgage lending, obviously because of what's taking place in the last few years, the government became very aggressive as to the criteria. I mean, there are still loans out there at 20 and 30%, but the person's credit must be amazing. But you're right, if someone's putting down 50% loan on a home, right, you would think that the lending criteria is much different. But again, that's one type of loan. And home loans, of course, they're very closely monitored in the last few years because of the way the market was. It went from very simple, you could just basically almost signature loans, and now, of course, you get the opposite. And of course, it's still looking to balance out. Those criteria, the lending criteria and also margin criteria, they change very frequently for all the banks. So, in some sense, you acknowledge that issue exists, but any bank would have to deal with it because those rules will change. Does that mean there is still discretionary lending? Yes. Like for example, mortgage lenders who are 100% self-funded, usually we call them hedge fund lenders, they get no money from the government. Hence, that's considered a private placement loan. They have complete discretion to use that money if they see fit. reason why the banks are so closely regulated, if they don't use that, that means they're using someone else's money and they're selling it as security. And that's one of the reasons why those banks get scrutinized more closely, because the person they're selling it to is Freddie Mae or Freddie Mac.
So regulation comes from them.
That's correct. So there are other lenders, usually not Asian, but there are other lenders who normally do not do that. For example, Opus Bank, which is a smaller commercial bank, they're a 100% self-funded lender, no Fannie Mae, no Freddie Mac, so their loans are completely at their discretion. And those are things the community bank would absolutely have to consider. That's one of the things when your next step would be evaluate how many types of, the different types of loans you would offer, how many, how much money is needed, would you try to raise it, would you try to use Freddie Mae or Freddie Mac for certain loans, because you may decide that, for the Thai community, that's not a good idea. You would need to do it a different way. And that's the point, is you'd be going through that process to find ways to give you the flexibility that you need.
So the regulation for each of the loan, they're
different.
So let's say just hypothetical. Let's say if we have the community bank here, and then you'll be able to get the fund from somewhere overseas. You don't need the money right here. Does that mean that you could modify the criteria a lot easier than getting some sort right here, sort of fund right here in this country? Or
Where the money comes from is not necessarily as important as the fact that it's yours. It's about how much money you have, is how much discretion you have. So smaller banks utilize lines of credit they get with bigger banks. So a lot of times what smaller banks will do is they'll actually put their money and they'll apply for a big loan with a big bank. And so they'll actually extend their ability to lend by actually, it's called syndication with another bank. So it all depends on how the bank works, how much money it has. That's why you can start banks with relatively small amounts of money, but it's all about how the bank is managed. The more you utilize the government, and the more you utilize other banks, the less flexibility you have.
you mentioned Tate when they first start a long time ago. How did they get all of from the people in the local
From the
community?
Chinese, members of the Chinese community. It was started by one gentleman who recently passed away last year. And a lot of it was from his business, he put into starting the bank, bought a small bank on a loan, and aggressively sold into the Monterey Park community. And he did it primarily by himself. Very ambitious. What he did was very challenging. It is not easy to build a bank. It is certainly not easy to build a bank by going door to door and selling again. But it's certainly doable, and it's doable when you're in a closed community where you know the people and you're talking to them and you're a business person as well. And you can explain the benefits probably better than I can. So from those perspectives, it took him time, but he was fairly successful fairly quickly. And so the bank's yields are different. So the bank can do fairly well, even though it'll take time for the community to grow. The biggest growth for the Chinese community in Los Angeles really came in the 1980s. That's when it really grew very rapidly. And you said you won't technical questions. Those were great. Those were great questions. Those were very technical. I have to get my book out.
David,
Sir.
from what you present, seems like you're very expertise in what you're talking about.
You studied it for a long time.
Yeah. And my question is, if you were someone to enter the group of investors, or to meet someone who are the initial investors, how do you come up with the ideas of group of people and say, I found this guy, this lady, whoever, they're interested. What do you have to do to present it to them and say, here, we have a plan, here's a strategy, and here what we are looking at?
there's two types of investors. There's those that have a strong interest in the community, and it's banking, so it's finance. Those that simply are looking to make money. All right, those, I mean, you could apply and look to either of them. Certainly, in the Thai community, you're going to find both. And of course, it's a bank. It has to have a blending of both. So the one thing about finance is there are a lot of investors that specifically look for things like this. In Los Angeles, we knew of a few groups of people that we thought if there was enough acceptance in the Thai community that they would probably be interested in partnering.
So at this stage now, which I talk about the feasibility, have you gone further to come up with a package saying here what we have? Are you interested?
Our next step would be the business plan, and that was, our job was to talk, and that's why meetings like this are happening, to talk to the members of the Thai community to make sure that the business community
Based
would
on
be
your
part of it.
survey, you already shown that there are interest in the Thai community or a Thai community bank.
For its services, our next, and the question I'm asking is about participation in the bank, because we certainly would need, you would want to have, as I mentioned, one of its success is to have key members of the Thai community be part of this as well. And that's part of the ownership, not just the
That's right.
participation.
So if you go to the next phase, what you have to do?
The next phase would be to develop a business plan, to really find the people that are interested, and to develop a business plan for a specific bank.
And what is the cost of doing the next phase? Is the Thai government going to sponsor it, or you're looking for someone to look into the next phase?
Well, for us, it would probably be either or. I think it would probably be private. I don't think it would be the Thai government.
So if in the next phase, what is the cost of doing that?
It's probably roughly around $50,000.
$50,000, okay. And
Because building a bank is not easy.
I understand that. And let's say you have a business plan that is cost $50,000 to come up with this plan.
Mm-hmm.
What is the next step?
You would take the plan, and you would take that plan, and you would propose it with an offering for the people to invest. You would have you'd have a core group before you would even start the business plan of people who would maybe see the report and say, I'm interested. Like, for example, you could take that report and you could just use that to gauge interest with a hedge fund or some other professional investment. Say, here's the economic impact of the Thai community. Right, it's $3 billion is what we calculate. $3 billion as economic impact is significant if you're going to open up a bank. So and then you're looking at savings rates and things of that nature. All those numbers that you sat through, those are things that a prospective investor would say, okay, that I'm interested in. And what you would normally do is you would probably talk to maybe 15 or 20 to gauge their actual interest. And you actually want to talk to some of the banks as well. And when you realized you had a certain degree and of people who were really committed to the project, then they would fund the business plan, knowing that there's already some degree of interest to minimize their risk. And then at that point, you would look to solidify financially all the people who had some degree of interest. You'd look to get a core amount of investors as well as capital. And more than likely, you would probably, in the business planning process, you'd probably identify probably a group of small banks that are on the market for sale, and the costs involved with acquiring them, and how you would do it. So the business plan would be fairly pragmatic in how you would actually acquire the bank and the services that would be part of it. So you would want to really refine what we started, really make it very practical, put it with numbers, show that the bank would be profitable, what it would have to generate, how many people it would have to service, how many staff it would need, how much money would be reserved, how long the acquisition process would take. We would go through a lot of those steps.
So this will be included in the business plan for this
Absolutely.
$50,000?
Yes, roughly.
It's $50,000.
bank business plan are usually about 5 times that. So, because there's financials alone
So
will probably
in
take
this
5 to 6
business
months.
plan, not just only it will include the operation, or it's generally talk.
And they include the operations. It'll include the operations. It'll even include specific packages that you would offer to members of the Thai community.
Including the possibility of looking for, like you suggested in the first step, is to buy existing land. You will have that information.
Absolutely, that's directly what we can acquire that relatively simply. You'd want to do the specific bank acquisition targets closer to the completion of the plan, because of course banks get bought and sold, so you'd want to have the most current information as the business plan was becoming complete. So I think you would also find that there would be some support from outside the Thai community, from investors. And the reason why is that's why they'll want to see the plan, because they're going to want to see certain financial calculations, especially for a bank. They're going to look at NPV and IRR rates. They're going to look at return on equity and return on investment, return on asset rates, which are, as we mentioned, are really important for banks. And knowing that the amount of money that they would need to put in isn't that big. So, for example, people normally invest in finance. The numbers that they play with are very significant. I mean, it's different than starting up a restaurant business. People who look at finance tend to be hedge funds with typically significant amounts of capital behind them, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. And Los Angeles happens to be home to, out of the top 50 hedge funds folks in finance, we have about 30. So those alone are people that would certainly look, and that's what their job is. They look for things like this because it's something different than other people are looking at. So there would be potential. And you would probably look at numbers that for even non-hedge fund investors, collaboratively within and without the Thai community, are not impossible to obtain. I think the key to the business plan isn't whether it's viable, because we believe it is. The key here is how it's managed. This is how it's done. And there are obstacles. I mean, and the biggest obstacle is that you're going to have to go out to the Thai community. It's not like setting up a branch somewhere and everyone's going to show up. You would set up a branch, but because the Thai community is so spread out, part of your plan is going to be making sure you have people with services and things they need and are going to approach, take the time, because since the community is not underbanked, these people have existing relationships, and mostly with the big 4 banks. As I mentioned, that's Chase, that's Citibank, that's Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. The vast majority of the Thai community has relationships with one of those 4 banks. And those are very large banking institutions. They're not going anywhere, they're solvent, they offer safety. They don't offer the services customized to what the Thai community could really utilize. They're not helping educate the Thai community to help grow their businesses either. When banks that large, the customers are really a number. It's very hard for them to give personalized service. And that's the difference. Of a banker, in this bank, you would have to have people going to the members of the community, knowing what to teach them, knowing how to help them grow their business. In a sense, the bankers would actually be almost consultants to some degree, to go and take time and talk to them and slowly over time build it. That's what the community banks do well. And it does return on investment. It's a profitable venture. But the primary key is, again, having the right management and people understanding that it's as much a commitment to an investment as it's a commitment to a community. The long-term benefit for these banks is very documented. These banks are huge. They're some of the biggest banks in the state of California. As you know, California, if it was a country, would be the 5th largest economy on the planet. And to have a bank like BBCN coming from nowhere through 2 acquisitions in 15, 20 years to be, you know, a bank worth net assets in excess of $25 billion